Hi, I'm Andrew Wallace, and welcome to the We've Got a Problem podcast, where each week we explore inspiring stories of struggle, success, and solutions to prevalent problems, and how our guests have turned problems into opportunities. This week I'm joined by Bill Priestley, creator of the Dream Job Blueprint, a program that helps young people and not so young people use and tailor their education to get their dream job. Bill, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. So, before we started recording, you said that you'd had some time in radio. Give me a little background. How'd you get your start? How many dream jobs have you had?
Oh, good grief. We're going to go back a long way here, aren't we? Long story short, college. I went to college to become a history teacher because that's the family business. All my families are my mom, my dad, my brother, my sister. They all went into teaching. And I was going to do history, and no doubt, true story. First week of class, I accidentally went down and got lost in the student center, which is really, really hard to do at the school I was at. It's kind of like a mouse getting lost in a paper bag. I wandered into what was the campus newspaper office, and 45 minutes later, I wandered out with a story assignment. And that's launched me into sort of sports media. That was a sports story. And then a year later, I was the sports editor of the campus newspaper, and the sports director of the campus radio station came in and said, "Hey, I've got a game we're doing tonight. Do you want to come and do stats for us?" And I'm like, "Sure, just don't put me on the air because I'm scared of microphones and I'm scared of cameras." And he's like, "All right, fine, no big deal." And I went to a fairly small school, and we were playing what would be considered a Power 5 school in our own little 900-seat gym. Somehow we got them to come up and play, and we beat them. And there was this one particular play. Now, we ran them out of the building. There was this one particular play where we had a three-point shooter who was one of the best three-point shooters in the country, and she got wide open late in the game, and she hit a three that put us up 13 with like 3 minutes to go, and all of a sudden everybody knew what was going to happen. And I realized at that moment that I wanted to be in radio because I was listening to my friend do the game, and I thought of two things. Number one, I could do what he was doing.
Right.
And number two, I think I could do it better than him. And so that was my start. And so I became the sports director of the campus radio station that year. And that launched a 25-year career in radio and media production.
Wow. I mean, hey, serendipity in a way. So that kind of begs the question, right? You in a sense stumbled into a dream job. And had one for quite some time, something that you...
Well, let me give a little bit of context there, because so like back when I was 12 years old, my dad, the teacher, the college professor, let's put it that way, asked me the ubiquitous question, what do you want to do with your life? And at the time I said, I want to be a sports writer. And thinking that was going to be the end of the conversation, I was delusional there. And my dad asks, like a great sports writer, a great follow-up question, which is, well, how many sports writers do you read? None. Okay, good point. Yeah. Touche. I'll go over here in the corner and sulk. But I wanted to be actually a sports writer at one point, and that's kind of the reason that I walked out of the campus newspaper office with a story assignment.
Sure.
But had my dad asked me that question and I had said sportscaster instead of sports writer, and he asked me that same question, well, how many sportscasters do you follow? Keep in mind at this point, really only 3 networks.
Right.
But I could probably list off 20 or 25 sportscasters. I could tell you what sports they were good at. I could tell you what sports they were bad at. I could tell you what sportscaster was on what network. And it was just something I intrinsically followed, but I never, ever wanted to be a part of it because, like I said, I'm scared of microphones and cameras. Obviously, I got over that.
Right.
But that's where the seeds were. And that's kind of gives you the context of where I ended up as far as that's concerned.
So, I mean, there's a big question there that your father asked I want to get into some other stuff as well, but I work in the film business as my day job. And a lot of people fall in love with the idea of being in the business for what they think it's like rather than what it is. So how many sports writers do you read is a good question, because you go, I like the idea of what I think a sports writer does, of being there in this, writing it up, doing all these things, but without reading it and understanding what it really looks like and how it goes, you start to kind of fantasize about that, which I hope that since they're still young people do a lot more of fantasizing than working on reality. And I'm wondering how that kind of ties into the dream job blueprint. So tell me the secret, as if there's only one, right? But tell me the secret to the dream job blueprint. How can we find a better job, help kids find better jobs? What's the process? Fill me in.
Okay. All right. Well, just to jump back just a little bit, I wanted to become a sports writer because A, you got to go to the game. Yep. B, you got to go to the game for free. And C, you got to write about the game. And that was basically it. That was it. That was my romance with
Sounds
that.
Great.
But yeah, sounds great.
Sign me up.
That is not what it is cracked up to be.
Right.
So what's the secret? Well, if you were to ask the question, what's your passion? That's kind of this big theme that a lot of people are getting caught up with. What if you ask the question, what do you want to do with your life? That's kind of the next question. If they go, well, I'm not really sure about. Well, what are you passionate about? Well, okay, that's some nebulous concept that really I don't think we get a real hold of.
Yep.
So, broken down into a nutshell, when you ask the question, what it is that you want to do with your life, the answer to that question has to be a verb. What do you want to do? I want to write. I want to direct. I want to build. I want to, the answer has to be a verb. If I ask you, what do you want to be when you grow up? The answer to that question has to be a noun. So I want to be a writer. I want to be a builder. I want to be that kind of thing.
Yep.
So we get caught in this idea that when you're looking for a quote unquote passion, you're looking for one word or something or one term. And that's not the case at all. You're actually looking for three. The first is an interest, and an interest is always a noun. The second is an ability or a verb. And the third is an audience or a group of people that you want to work with or work for. Now, if you take this idea and say, for instance, look at basically any kind of job can be summarized in that way. It's a combination of an interest and an ability. For instance, math teacher, interest in math, ability to teach it. Football coach, interest in football, ability to coach it. Oncologist, interest in cancer, ability to fix, treat, or diagnose, that kind of thing. So what you can do is compile a list of what you're interested in, combine that with a list of what it is that you are. It has to be a combination of three things. Number one, you have to want to be able to do it, the verb.
Right.
You have to be able to do it, and you have to be able to do it for somebody else.
Right.
And therefore, that you give value to someone else. Therefore, you get paid for it. That's the only definition there of a job. And so then you take that to the third level, which is, okay, who do you want to work with? Let me go back to the math teacher idea. So are we talking elementary, middle school, high school, college, remedial, military, English as a second language? Who is that? Are we talking big city, small town, demographic? Who is that person that you want to serve? You'll find people that have, certain idea. Like, I want to be a math teacher, but they say, you know what, I don't want to work in Philadelphia, but I'd rather work in the suburbs, or I'd rather work in the inner city. And they have that idea, that person that they really feel strongly about serving. And so with that, what you get is a map of a job, essentially, that stimulates you intellectually because you have a strong interest in it. You have a job that drives you physically because it's something you can do, that you want to do, that you can do for others. And you have something that fulfills you emotionally or spiritually because you have purpose or place in serving someone else along those lines. So that's basically, in a nutshell, the dream job blueprint.
I mean, when it comes down to it for me, we have this conversation with a lot of my guests, it comes down to understanding your values and actually getting to the core of what drives you. And a lot of people, as they go on in their careers, lose touch with those kinds of things. And I don't know if people necessarily ever had it. That's kind of the part of the question, right? Because if a lot of us did something that was aligned with our values, whatever those values are, whatever is important, whatever we want to prioritize, and then did it, we would be way further along than I think a lot of us are. And there is a component, and I've talked about this with other guests, that when you are young and going into college or just coming out of college, so much of who you are, what you are, it comes from other people, and what they've wanted for you, and what they've told you to do, and what they have told you is important, or what you think they think might be important. And it's all this kind of second-handed stuff that it's possible, I mean, certainly, to avoid doing that little bit of soul searching to figure out what it is that you like, what it is you want to do, and who you want to do it for, and what you're good at, and how you can do that. And even, let's say, I'm not great at this, but I want to be better at it because I haven't had a lot of experience with it, but I love it. I love doing it. Time passes. Immediately it flies out the window when I'm doing it, and I could just do it all day long.
That's the thing that's really interesting too about that aspect of it, is perhaps if you look at people that say you believe are masters at their work,
right?
They will often say, I am not a master, I'm still learning. Right.
Yes.
So
yes.
You can apply that to that level there too.
Yes. And of course, I don't expect any, say, 18-year-old or 22-year-old to be brilliant at anything yet. I would hope that they're still learning. And certainly we should all still be learning, but that you go, I have some facility for this. I have some ability that I'm developing, and I'm quick with it, and I get it, and it goes, and I love it, and I can't stop talking about it. And that's a little bit that's a little bit of what that little spark that you hope to capture, I guess, in passion. So yes. What would you say, I mean, along those lines, conversely, is the biggest hurdle? What's keeping people from doing that kind of work? Is it just that they don't know it? Or is there some resistance to it? I don't know.
I think the first thing is that we, like I said before a little bit, I think that we tend to think of the answer to the question as being simple.
Right.
And it's not. And it's kind of like answering that question, what is the meaning of life? You can come up with a simple answer, and you can find that, and right. people will, that can generally be agreed upon. But I think that when people really sit down and think about it, they go, okay, that's a much bigger question than I thought it was. And right. The same thing comes, I think, in this idea of, what is it that I really want to do? And, kind of to delve a little bit deeper into it, one of the things that I talk about in terms of, another question that people will get is, what are you interested in? And of course, that points to one of the three things. But again, that's a question where it's kind of like, please pick the Wikipedia page of your choice from like the 3.7 trillion Wikipedia pages there are. Like, all right, and now I've got to go through this labyrinth of whatever. Instead, let's rephrase the question. Let's say, instead of that, let's ask, what is it that you can talk about for hours on end and not get bored?
Yep.
And so now we've come back to not you looking at everything, but now you looking inward and going, what do I gravitate towards?
Yep.
What's my natural thing? What gets my attention? That's the definition of an interest. I'll give you a second question. What are you scared of?
Oh, because
interests are not always things that are positive. Say for instance, is there a problem in the world that you'd like to solve? Whether it's disease or poverty or anything like that. And we're not talking when we say, what are you scared of? We're not talking about spiders and snakes and all that stuff. We're talking about things that legitimately scare the heck out of you. Right. And so then, all right, what gets your attention? And then you start, that was the thing about me in sportscasting, was that I intrinsically kind of, followed these people and listened to them and listened to their mannerisms and watched them as they worked. And that was the building point. I mean, I didn't do it because I was scared of it, because I was scared of microphones and cameras, but I was still motivated to learn.
Yeah.
And that's where I think we get, a little bit confused about, it's kind of those things. But, starting with, what do you talk about for hours on end and not get bored? What are you scared of? Those are two basic building points. There are many others that you could come from, but those are the big ones. And when you start, that's one part of that concept. And like I said, when we talk about verbs, when we talk about abilities, you're talking about a verb that has to meet 3 criteria. Not just can you do it, but also do you want to do it?
Mm-hmm.
And then can you do it for somebody else?
Yes. Yeah.
And that's where you get the value out of it. So now all of a sudden we're building this idea that it's not terribly complicated, but it is at least a little bit, you can still grasp it.
Mm-hmm.
And you can put those things together. And this is actually the thing that really caught me off guard, because I went to graduate school 10 years ago or so, and kind of put this to test with some of my education professors when I did my master's degree, and they said that they really, really agreed with it, and that it works, and that you need to push on with this, and that's one of the reasons that I kept on going with it. But when it comes down to the idea of putting these things together, the thing that caught me off guard is that this works across the board, which was really mind-blowing for me. So if you take any interest and any ability that follows those 3 criteria, you can formulate a job out of it, which is nuts. And I used to speak at that university that I got my master's degree at, and I would often ask, does anybody have an odd pairing of an interest that maybe has nothing to do at all with the ability that you might have? And someone poked up and they said, well, I have an interest in bones, like skeletal bones, and I have an ability to sing. Go for it. All right. Now, okay, follow me here.
All right.
So I don't know how old you are, but I am of an age where I remember a character on PBS named Slim Goodbody. And Slim was a guy who was dressed head to toe in a skin-tight outfit, which had the organs and all the internal organs painted on him. And he would sing about health. And so I suggested, why don't you start a children's television show program where you sing about health? And she looked at me like I was, an idiot. But does that meet the criteria of forming a job? Yes, it does. Does it mean that you want to have it? No, it does not. So. Right. So I had another student. I was speaking at a high school. He says, I have an interest in mythology, and I have an ability to cook.
Okay.
And I said, why don't you start a mythologically themed restaurant and make mythological food and do it along those lines? And his jaw hit the floor, and he was like, "That is so cool.
That would be cool." So, and I would go to that restaurant. Who would not get that? That would be. I mean, 5-star Yelp review right here.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah. But when you get to that point, where, okay, all right, we have a very odd pairing. That usually means you're going to have to do something that's never been done before. You're going to have to be entrepreneurial about it. You're going to have to stretch the bounds and go where perhaps no one else has gone before, in order to make that vision true, if indeed it is what you want to do.
Right. Well, and I think there's a component there of using your head to come up with something different. That and that's kind of what we need to be doing anyway, because there's very rarely going to be a box that you're going to fit in perfectly, and you might have to kind of make your own. So what?
I tell every kid, every job is not perfect.
Right.
It won't. You will find aspects of it that you won't like.
Yeah.
Just put that by the wayside. There is no perfect niche for you in terms of, yes, you may be able to find something that's maybe 60%, 70%, 80% that you love and 20% that you would absolutely not care for. You're lucky if you can get that, but that's more than adequate to fill my cup anyway.
Yeah. I mean, you're trying to you're trying to maximize, I suppose, or optimize. You're not going to get perfect. Perfect is an illusion.
Yes.
But if you can get, hey, I can get 20% better. Great. Let's figure it out. I found a way I can move into something that would give me just that little bit of extra stuff that I'm fascinated about a little more often. Cool. Let's get there. We're just trying to do the best that we can, which I think there's probably a emphasis on perfection, that an overemphasis or focus on trying to just find that perfect thing. And if I don't get that one thing, then everything all is lost and I should just give up. I struggle with remembering what it was like long ago in ancient times, to think about trying a plan, right? Kind of putting a blueprint together and thinking that was going to be the thing. And perhaps over researching and stressing over, is that going to be right? And thinking through it and what I love and what I want to do and all these things. And a couple years down the line go, whoops, don't really have the stomach for that. Don't think I'm right for it. That was a little bit of a hard time for me. And of course, now I'm out of school, right? So I got into finance. I enjoyed aspects of finance. I like numbers. I like helping people. I was working for a wealth management company. It kind of met some of those standards. But it turned out that the day-to-day was not doing those things. And I looked at very successful people who I really enjoyed working with, who were not getting kind of increases in quality of life and other things that were also important to me at the time in the place that I was in. And I could look a few levels up and go, I don't think this is it. I think I kind of mischose here. What do you tell somebody who's kind of, just go back to the drawing board? What do you do in that case? Not
exactly. Well, obviously it's going to depend on person to person, but let's say, for instance, if you form a triangle, and the base of that triangle is your interest and the ability, and the top of that triangle is your person that you want to work with, your dream client, if you will. Let's look at that triangle and say, all right, what are we really dissatisfied with here? Mm-hmm. Are we dissatisfied with the interest, the industry that we're working in? Are we dissatisfied with the work that we're doing? Are we dissatisfied with the people that we're working with or working for? If we're close, then let's change one of those things and not all three.
Don't throw the baby out with the bathwater, huh?
No, and somebody said, all right, you know what? I need a new job. No, not necessarily. All right, because then you start completely over from scratch, and then all of a sudden those three things are filled by three completely different things, and you lose control of those things. And of course, there's always the grass is greener on the other side. You know, you get lured into, oh, they're doing so well, I should go over there and do that, or oh, I should, because like you said, quality of life maybe escalating in this one area of finance, but maybe not in this other area, and I should be over there. That's obviously a big problem. But what I would do is, if you're a person that is thinking about taking a different role or a different career, take a look at those three things and assign a value to all three. In other words, a scale of 1 to 10. All right, I'm a 4 here, I'm a 7 here, I'm a 6 here, and decide, all right, if that adds up to a number over 24, you're in a really good place. Yeah. If that number does not add up to something more than 10, we need to consider a massive career change.
Right.
That kind of thing. But look at that and evaluate it from that perspective, and that'll give you a much better chance of analyzing where are you really dissatisfied. And then go from there in terms of making that career change. If it is a career change, or if it's maybe just moving to a different part of your current workplace. It may be that. I think a lot of people are stuck in that situation where they're in an industry in which they want to work and they are not doing what they want, and they go and they don't think about going and talking to HR and saying, you know what, I really feel like I could be very good over here if I could get maybe an hour or two, show my value in this area, and perhaps maybe give a better benefit to the company that way. And instead we just go, yeah, you know what, I'm just going to drop this entire thing and go someplace else.
I don't, in a sense, blame people for taking that route, because there is a point that you can get to and go, you know what? Don't care. Done. Over it. This is not the place. Don't want to clean break. Grass is always greener. Fine. But really, if right now, when it's easier, quote unquote, to get a job, even though it's getting harder at the moment, but it's easier than it's been in quite some time to get a job compared to many years ago. I managed to graduate college in a difficult job market that got even more difficult when I left my job after 2.5 years and the stock market had crashed and all was lost. So when it's easy to find a job, you get that thinking of, well, I can just find another one and get a different one. when it's not, you kind of feel a little stuck where you are. And the way to feel unstuck is to change your roles and responsibilities within the same company, because believe me, that company is much more willing to help you out than they want to have to find another employee because of the cost of finding another employee and all those kinds of things. You're a proven quantity. They know the quality of your work. You're a success. You're a superstar. Great, wonderful. And when you say, hey, I might want to move into a different area, I don't know, especially in this world, what company doesn't go, cool, let's talk about it. Let's have that conversation. And seeing it as a partnership rather than an employee-employer kind of thing is probably best. And I don't mean to say we ought to be calling everybody by their first names and know the names of all their children and just turn it into some kibbutz. But the idea of helping out each other, solving problems. I mean, that's the ultimate question: is what problem do you solve? How can you help somebody out? What is it that you uniquely are qualified and able to do, perhaps better than or as well as a lot of other people that's really cool that you like doing and all those things. I wonder why it seems like everybody's dissatisfied. I mean, we talk about the grass is always greener phenomenon. But it seems like when you survey employees, lots of people lack satisfaction. And I wonder if it's not, and I'm not trying to put words in your mouth like 60 Minutes does, but is there a little bit of a concept of people not trying to shirk responsibility, but just not doing that soul searching, look at your values, think about how to get where you want to get to, and just kind of going with the flow that's doing it, or is it something else?
Let me start that answer with a study that I saw that I think it was the Labor Department came out with about 10 years ago, and that said that for college graduates can expect to have 15 jobs over the course of their lifetime.
Yes.
And so I am right on that mark right now. I am right on that pace, and which is very sobering at the same time. But I think that there's a lot of keeping up with the Joneses. Mm-hmm. I think we saw that, and we're continuing to see that with the Great Resignation. In terms of, you know what, I can do better. I can do better. And moving on to some other company, sure. But because all of a sudden the minimum wage went pew, and then, or not the minimum wage, but the minimum hiring wage, I should say. Right. When you see $15 go up for, a job that 2.5 years ago was, $8 an hour, that kind of thing. So I think there's definitely that itch to try and be in the best place possible. I mean, we as humans are mostly geared towards making things better. I mean, that's mm-hmm. always our decision making is always around going from a space of scarcity to a space of abundance, and that's kind of where we put ourselves. And if we can only take a step back, which is not something we are aligned to do necessarily, but if we can take a step back and look at ourselves and say, all right, what is it that I really, truly, honestly want? Which means we're going to have to do some self-introspection. Yeah. And that's the hard part, I think, for a lot of people, is that the first thought that people may come, people our age may come to, of that is like, oh, I've got to go to therapy. No, you don't have to go to therapy. But let's at least talk about you in terms of, what is it that you really want? That's the mm-hmm. question. And that's the question, unfortunately, this is the dangerous part of this business for me, is that when you ask the question of a teenager or a college student, what do you want to do with your life? That is a guided question, a very guided question, because from a parental perspective, what it means is, what are you going to do to contribute to society? Mm-hmm. What are you going to do to be a responsible adult? And they don't want to ask the real question that the kid wants to answer, which is, what do you want? And that means all bets are off.
Right.
That means anything is possible.
Yeah.
So So when you can phrase it in that way, then all of a sudden perspectives change. And if you ask, this is why I say it's dangerous, because you start asking teenagers, what do you want? Eyes start lighting up and things happen, and you can see gears turning, and all of a sudden, it's a different ball game out there. But that's the kind of thing that you really have to do if you want, if you're mid-career, or even if you're late career, or even if you're retiring. What am I going to do with my life?
Right. And what do I want?
There. Right. That's the there are two points in our lives where we have a required firing. One is when we leave school, and the other is when we retire. You have to answer that question at least twice. One of the reasons that I did this, again, I come from a family of teachers. The idea for this actually started while I was teaching. I did get a job. I was a high school history teacher, 10th grade world history. I got permission to change the spring research project to what I call the passion paper. And the deal was you could write a up to 10-page paper on any subject that you wanted to. The paper had to have 3 sections. Number 1, it had to be the history of it. Number 2, where it is now. Number 3, where is it going? And that thing went over huge. The passion paper was an idea based around getting kids interested in academics.
Yeah.
So here's how history can be applied when you really are interested in what you're talking about, and that kind of thing. And so when Dream Job Factory was built, and I'm working on a curriculum now where, say, for instance, someone could take the course and they find, okay, I've got this dream job. Now that you've got a dream job idea, let's go back and see what you actually need to study in order to make this possible.
Yes.
So let's go through your math, because every human endeavor is connected to 6 disciplines: math, science, language, philosophy, art, and history. So then you can go through and say, for instance, let me just find a random, smartphone. Okay. So if I just look at this, you can say, okay, can you see first off, what is it?
Right.
It's a smartphone. All right. So that's your English. That's your language. Can you see the math? Can you see the science? Can you see the philosophy? Can you see the history? Can you see the art? Now you get to see what academically you need to do to achieve whatever it is that you want.
Yeah. I mean, so we're coming to the end here a little bit, and this has been fascinating and really encouraging to me, and I hope to my listeners. But I try to ask a couple of questions of everybody, and the first of which is, what do you feel like the biggest fallacy is that everybody buys into that's just total hogwash?
Working for money. I have seen countless people get into jobs and do phenomenally well and not have to worry about, and they don't have to worry about the money because they don't want to worry about the money. And they've been good enough at that particular job to sustain themselves financially as far as that's concerned. As soon as you take a job for the paycheck, you are in trouble.
Yeah.
And I think that's something that, I mean, granted, yes, that is the gateway to better quality of life. That is the gateway to these other things. I know, who was it? Daniel Pink said it in the book Drive. There are 3 different types of motivation. One is primal, what basically eating, sleeping, reproducing. One is carrot versus stick, extrinsic motivation. The third is intrinsic motivation. What do you want to do, or what would you do if there were no reward involved?
Right.
And when we get past carrot versus stick and we get into intrinsic, that's where the rewards are.
Yeah.
As opposed to taking a job for the paycheck, for the perks, for the title, for the chance, for the one moment that you really want. You'll find that those things are fleeting, whereas coming to work and doing something every day that you find joy in, that you find challenge in, that you find intellectually interesting, that's, and especially long-term goals. People in those situations don't think about the money. Yeah. And they just go out and they do it.
So conversely,
okay,
what is underrated? What do we need more of?
Boy, this is the first thing that comes into my head, and it's such a massive, big thing that I don't think I even want to say this, but I think that if we were just a little bit more vulnerable and talk about things on a little bit more of a personal level, everybody's got problems. And I think that when you look at social media, you look at Facebook, most everybody is screaming, "Hey, I got a perfect life."
Right.
But if we were just a little bit more vulnerable, I think that would do wonders for the psyche of people that just say, hey, you know what? Not only is this person being vulnerable, but they have a problem I can solve.
Yeah.
That, and you get into that kind of thing. That is something that I think would be earth shattering if we could take that kind of step.
That would be amazing. Absolutely amazing, because we'd be bringing our more authentic selves everywhere we go. Mm-hmm. And hey, you don't know what problems you might be able to solve if somebody doesn't tell you that they've got them.
Right.
Right. I mean, I can't help you if I didn't know. And now, hey, you know what? I've got this happened to me the other day, and it just, not even a problem, but I want to install crown molding in my new set, which you can't even see on camera. Doesn't matter. Nobody can see it but me. Right. But I wanted to do it. And so I went out and found what I wanted to do and went through a whole big process, only to find out that my stepfather has a contact in the crown molding business that I didn't even know, because I never mentioned it to him. I just went out and did it. You go, well, that would have saved me hundreds of dollars if I'd known that this existed, and a lot of headache and frustration. And I didn't even mention it. Can you imagine what that would be like with a serious problem? I mean, to be more open and authentic. Bill, thank you so much for joining me today. It's been fantastic. Folks, if you want to learn more about Bill, you can find him on his website at dreamjobfactory.com, as well as on TikTok and Facebook. Links are in the show notes as always. And until next time, we don't have a problem. We've got an opportunity.